Hey, what's up, everybody? We are live again on Conversations with Chris, and today we're diving into something that almost everyone experiences, but very few people actually understand. We're talking about your own emotions. So we're taught to control them, suppress them, power through them, or in some circles, actually spiritualize them. But what if that's the wrong script? So we're here with Wes. He's a licensed trauma therapist, a founder of SolidSoul Coaching, and someone who believes your hardest emotions aren't liabilities, they're intelligence. His newest thing we're adding to the resume is his upcoming TEDx talk. We're bringing him over to Lake Worth Beach. And there he's going to be challenging the idea that anxiety, anger, and overwhelm are problems to eliminate. Instead, he's asking deeper questions. What if those emotions are actually trying to guide you? Yay, Wes, man. Man, that's it's a lot of stuff. You know, I love looking at your resume and seeing all the things, and I've been working with you about this upcoming talk. But talk to us. Tell us a little bit about yourself, man, about your personal story, your paradigm shift.
Yeah, well, you're kind, Chris, and thanks for doing this show. I grew up with big emotions, and I learned very quickly that they caused problems. And so I would try to hide them, and they would leak out. So just to give context, grew up outside of Chicago, just typical Midwest, youngest of four, and we did sports, we did music, we did well mostly in academics, but as the youngest of four, I was kind of following in my the footsteps of my older siblings and feeling to some degree that kind of pressure. And so no one ever told me. I mean, my parents never ever told me that you have to measure up to XYZ. Nobody ever told me that, but I internalized a message. And I would imagine a lot of high performers tuning in at some point internalized a message, whether it was from some experience externally or just meaning that they made internally. And so that turned into constant pressure, which turned into all kinds of, at certain points, disappointment, other points, shame, other points, just outright anger at myself or at others or how things were going. And like I say, knew that caused problems and learned pretty quickly, I think I need to hide this. And it took a long time to recognize that was wrong.
Yeah, it's I mean, we have a handful of those like kind of epiphany moments in our life. I mean, you mentioned a moment where you had a friend said, "We need people like you in the world." You mentioned that in your talk.
Yeah, that was definitely a turning point for
What
me.
was happening? I
And
mean, what was happening in your life at that time?
yeah, well, here's the thing. So I grew up in circles of faith, Christianity. Grew up in a church. Grew up in circles where spiritual things were really important, and ended up, even in Sunday school or some of the summer missions projects or the summer Bible camps. And what's kind of ironic about that world, at least the way that I internalized it, I think that's an important clarification. The way that I internalized it was equating some kind of spiritual maturity with like emotionally calm all the time. Like, people who are spiritually have strong faith don't ever get upset about anything. And that was really wrong. And the reason that I'm giving that backstory is because at this point in my life, I was working as a therapist. I was helping out lead our local church as a pastor. Okay, and still among the team of some of the other leaders and other pastors, I was still like having these moments where I was like, man, I'm kind of overreacting. What's going on? And this was a guy who was a mentor. He was a coach to me. And he had experienced some of that on my worst days or pressure days, or when I was just impulsive and was like, I don't understand this decision, da da da. And the fact that one, he had respect enough to talk to me, and two, he had the grace to say, hey man, I'm going to look beyond some of this overreaction, and I'm not going to condemn you or put you in a box or write you off. But man, one of his phrases is, I want to love people into their full potential, which I love that. I want to love people into their full potential. That's exactly, when I reflect back on that moment, what he
What a
was doing.
great comment.
Yeah. So he's like, hey
Loving
man.
people into their full potential.
Yeah. So it was very direct but loving. Say, hey man, the world needs more people that feel like you do. And it was this paradigm shift, because up to that moment, hard emotions, anxiety, overwhelm, stress, anger
Yeah.
caused problems. And it was the first time, I would say, it gave me permission to even consider that, wait a second, this might actually be the gateway into solving problems. And oh my gosh, that unleashed a whole journey of And I was already a therapist, right? I was already a therapist at this point, but really honing in on what's going on in the body and how do we harness this for great good.
So there's a lot of liability involved with believing your emotion, like a lot of a heavy cost involved with believing your emotions are a liability. I mean, so what's the difference between being ruled by emotion and being guided by it?
Yeah, that is a great question. I mean, I think there really are two extremes, and we want to hit the middle. One extreme, you completely ignore them. And generationally, we can think of examples of this, even culturally. I work with a lot of people from Central and South America. Culturally, there's not always a huge emphasis on emotions, in part because of how someone grew up, in part because of just survival mindset, depending on someone's context. And like I say, generationally. So that's one extreme, to ignore them. The other extreme is to indulge them and only follow emotions. And of course, both of these extremes become dangerous. When we ignore them, we're not really paying attention to the signals of either boundaries in our lives or values in our lives, or a certain line that's like, hey, this really isn't okay. We're just not paying attention to that. And we run the risk of invalidating others who really depend on us, whether that's a child or someone else who's depending on us. On the other hand, when we just indulge them, we're really building a life on shifting sand, because feelings are fleeting. I was just telling you before we hit the record button, and we were up all night. We got, two kids who they're sick and stuff's coming out both ends. Sorry for your listeners, but some of you will connect. So you know what? Today, I'm tired, and today it requires more energy for me more effort for me to show up with clients right now, with therapy and coaching clients, even for my own family. If I built my life on my feelings, this would be a very different conversation, right? This would be my day would be very different. Am I tired? Yeah. I'm not going to build my life on that though. So I want to recognize the middle ground is to recognize, to identify, to interpret them, and ultimately to use them as a catalyst. So we don't ignore, we don't indulge. And I will say this, there's like a 1% exception for each. If you're in combat and someone's shooting at you, it doesn't matter what you feel, just stay alive. Okay. That's the exception. And you know what? There are moments where it's like, I remember in college, I was like, I should probably go to bed, but there were like 8 of us. We're like, let's just stay up all night. Let's watch Fight Club and go to the grocery store and get a bunch of Doritos or something. And I was like, why not? So like the 1% exception, sure. But by and large, we run into grave danger if we ignore or indulge. What we want to do is we want to identify what's going on with me. We want to interpret it. What's it trying to get my attention about? Is there an unmet need? Is there a line that's been crossed? Is there a value that somebody's not respecting? Or honestly, sometimes it's just, I need to take a nap. And when we interpret, then it becomes intelligence. I like the way that you said that, because it can guide our next constructive steps. It's not leaking out on a fiery social media rant, or leaking out in passive aggressive comments, or leaking out even against ourselves in our own internal narrative of, man, you, whatever terrible thing you want to tell yourself. But we're using it almost like a trained stallion. Think of it like a trained stallion. The stallion's got power. It's got power in itself, but it doesn't have to dominate us. We can actually channel it and utilize it for great good.
It's, I mean, I always have a thing I tell people, I tell my kids all the time, I say, your thoughts and feelings are not valid tests for reality, though they're really real to us. They don't exist outside of us. And that's kind of like a liberating thing. But this idea of harnessing to then affect your exterior world in a positive way is pretty cool. I mean, why do you think our culture in particular is so uncomfortable with strong emotion?
Yeah, well, the ironic thing is, scroll through any feed, things are very strong emotion right now.
I avoid it.
All the news, all the news. So on one hand, like, there is this just explosiveness of strong emotion that, I mean, we could get into the details, may or may not be constructive. There are certainly, throughout history, even the last 50 years, we've seen more effective uses of strong emotions when it comes to injustice, so on and so forth, than others, right? So it's ironically, there's this explosion on one hand, on national stages and bigger issues, and yet in our interpersonal, like, not many people want to talk to their boss, or really work that thing out with their sister, or maybe have a hard conversation to actually create a better marriage, which is this big irony, because there's explosion on one hand and there's a suppression on the other hand. So I think, one, because of our own story and our own experience, I think that we, to some degree, equate expression with danger. Sometimes that's been met with criticism. Sometimes that's been met with just ignoring. Sometimes that's been met with emotional distance. And because of our own story, we interpret that and think it's, well, maybe not as helpful. Maybe it's not so good after all. And so we end up, instead of like creating a better reality for ourselves and for others, we end up stuck.
That's it's and this is leaking into every part of our culture, really. I mean, you've got some interesting ideas around anxiety, and I'm just curious, what are high performers specifically getting wrong about anxiety? You mentioned
Yeah.
it, you just kind of just kind of like mentioned it quickly before.
Yeah. So just the other day, because I do what I do, the algorithm on literally every platform are other people that talk about what I do. So I was going to watch a YouTube video, and on popped this woman. She was talking about, let me teach you how to live a stress-free life. And to some degree, right, we don't want to be over stressed, but the point is never to be stress-free. And here's what I think high performers get wrong, particularly when we buy into, hey, I want no stress ever, no anxiety, anxiety-free. There is a stress response system built into us on purpose. And it's actually really healthy, and it's meant to bless, it's meant to protect, it's meant to be a good thing. Where it goes wrong is when it goes up into a panic or down into a paralysis, and we get stuck. But the actual firing of the amygdala to the hypothalamus, to the pituitary gland, to the adrenal glands that release this cortisol and this endocrine, like that goes off when your alarm goes off, right? That's a good thing to get us up, to activate us, to move us into action. That's a really, really good thing. And so what happens is that there's this activating energy that is meant on purpose to move us into constructive action. And so when we just try to eliminate it, we're going about it wrong. Versus, like I say, it's almost like taming a stallion or harnessing like this powerful force, because it's already there, right? If we're feeling anxiety, it's already there. So it's either gonna take us over, or we're gonna utilize it to do some great things.
It's what you do. It's just like anything else. It's like a tool. What you do with it, right? It's avoiding the extremes, I guess. Like it's because it's there. I mean, there's people. You need a little bit. You need a little bit of this to kind of get moving. It's fuel for you to. It's motivational fuel. But sometimes there's people that are just constantly like idling at 99. There's constantly stressed out. And it's almost counterproductive. It causes them, they're crippled by it. They're like that high level anxiety that causes them to do nothing. I mean, is that you think that's all? You think that's all connected to emotions in that entrepreneurial world?
Yeah, for sure. And I think where we really get to the place where magic and transformation can happen is when we ask, well, what's under the anxiety? So there's a stress response, but as working with survivors of physical abuse, sexual abuse, domestic violence, environmental neglect, there is this leftover stress response to something that was very real danger, that now is no longer the case. The person is safe, and yet their stress response is still misfiring. So in trauma, we call that a trauma trigger. But the same thing happens even if there's not a sort of a typically categorized trauma. Something happens in someone's life, and there's a stress response to it. So we need to ask ourselves, am I getting anxious about the right things in the right ways for the right reasons?
Okay, yeah,
and that's where the magic happens, what's underneath it.
That expository moment, asking yourself those questions. So I'm sure that's it on a daily basis, right? What happens in relationships when we suppress emotion?
Yeah, things can seem calm until they're not. I mean, ultimately, there are things that I feel sometimes that I don't like feeling and that I don't even agree with. I say, why am I getting so upset about this? Right?
Yeah.
Or, gosh, why am I not sleeping right now? I'm really anxious about this. Why? I don't like it and I don't agree with it. And yet that's important data. That's important information about something going on with the condition, I would say, of my soul, right? The condition of my being and my mind at that point. And so when in a relationship we hold that back, and of course there are different types of relationships, there are different moments, there's such a thing as code switching. I'm not gonna walk into my boss's office and go, I'm recovering from chronic emotional, trauma as a child, or whatever. You don't do that. But by and large in relationships, if one, we're not paying attention to what's going on inside of us, but two, we're not expressing that. And of course, that's a learned skill, and there are ways to do that healthier than others. Well, then ultimately, we're not being seen, known, and loved. We're not allowing ourselves to be seen, known, and loved. Usually because it feels a little too risky. But that's a huge cost, because we are created to be seen and known and loved. I mean, this is why there are all kinds of secret addictions. There are all kinds of looking for relief. There's because we're not seen, known, and loved.
It's Tony Robbins. I'm a fan of Tony Robbins. I know not everybody is, but when I was at one of his events, and we did an exercise about. He said there's 4 primal needs. There's love or connection, love or human connection, significance, right? And then there was certainty and uncertainty. And uncertainty can also be called variety. He said those are the 4 primal needs. And he said when 3 of those things, if there's something in your life and 3 of those things are getting hit at a high level, that can come an addiction. Doesn't matter if it's a person, a substance, something that you're doing. And then he goes on to say that the 2 spiritual needs are growth and contribution. So there's these 6 needs, 4 primal, 2 spiritual. And he said, which 2 are the most important to you? And for me, it was actually growth and contribution. I live in those. And then I was like, oh, those are the most important ones for me. Because if I'm doing that stuff, everything else falls into place. And then he went on to comment and said, if you live in these, he's like, you have a more fulfilling and easier life. And I was like, oh man, that's what I'm doing. Sounds
like a helpful framework. Cool.
That's why I feel good all the time. Yeah, cool. But this is, this shows up a lot in leadership too. Like, I was, in being a CEO, it was, you run into this and that. So like what happens in leadership when we ignore, emotion, when we ignore that?
Yeah. We want to be healthy leaders, right? Healthy leaders, healthy leaders tend to lead healthy organizations or companies or churches or groups or whatever it may be. It's virtually impossible to have an unhealthy leader leading something healthy. So it's important to understand what is driving someone. Again, there are moments to get angry. We just want to get angry in the right ways for the right reasons about the right things, right? And always address an issue and not attack people. Leaders go wrong when they attack people. However, addressing an issue is a very, very positive thing. Same with anxiety. There are certain things, anxiety is that activating energy that helps us prepare for some pending perceived threat in the future. Hey, as a leader, you're forward thinking, you're future pacing, you're vision casting. And so maybe you don't call it a threat, but you're observing the landscape for, hey, where could be the potential pitfalls? We still want to serve people at a high level. We want to be able to do this well, and we want to do it with a team that's working well together. All right. So you're getting anxious to the right degree about the right things in the right ways for the right reasons, rather than, oh my gosh, what if people don't like me? And I'm being a little facetious when I say it like that. However, that's a real thing. And there's leaders that lead from, I just want to feel significant and I just want people to like me. And so criticism feels really threatening. So my short answer would be that.
It's, you talk about a simple question that can shift everything. And what is that question? The question, the shifting question that Wes has got. That's the gold. What is it?
Yeah, well, people got to tell the TED Talk to hear it. Now, honestly, there's a whole framework. I created the emotional freedom framework to really help people step into learning how to harness these things. One, understand where they come from, but then understand mind, body, and spirit. By spirit, I mean our connection to God, but to others as well. In other words, our relational context. And it all begins with one question, right? If I were to boil down to one thing in the moment when you feel angry and listener, you will at some point, when you feel sad or heavy, when you feel anxious and overwhelmed, asking yourself, what is this trying to get my attention about? What is this telling me? Because there's an activating energy, right? And that activating energy, like I was alluding to before, might be so that you can honestly go have a healthy meal, because it's been 3 weeks since you've eaten something healthy and your body's crying out for it. And that's why the mood is actually pointing to food. Or take a nap, right? Or have a hard conversation. And you don't want to have that hard conversation. Most of us don't. And yet, the activating energy is a gift to be able to actually go and do something about what is wrong in XYZ relationship or XYZ situation, right? You're not attacking the person, right? It's a learned skill, right? But you're addressing the issue, and you're only going to do that when you learn to use that activating energy. So it might bring you a lot of different directions.
Mm-hmm.
I promise you, it's not going to bring you to just an empty social media rant or attacking or getting violent, physically violent. It's not going to bring you there, but it can bring you to a lot of different conclusions when you start to ask yourself, what are you trying to get my attention about?
I like that. Yeah, that's a good one. So it's, what is this trying to get my attention about? Yeah, that's that makes a lot of sense. Thanks for sharing some of that framework. Walk us through what that looks like in real time. Say someone feels overwhelmed at work or in their business. What do they do? Do they start with that question and kind of this framework of being executed in real time?
Yeah, for sure. Without getting into the depth of the framework, the way that the question becomes operative is, okay, what's this trying to get my attention about? I'm feeling a lot of pressure. Okay, that brings me to the next. What are the sources of my pressure? And almost putting it under a microscope. In fact, I just did this with a client yesterday and put in all the different pressure points, from bigger ones to work schedule's crazy to smaller ones. To, in this moment, I was really hoping that our family would experience this, and it turned out to be this. So I felt threat because of some frustrated, idea that I had that didn't turn out. And we put it under a microscope and we slowed it down and came up with 7 or 8 sort of sources of pressure for him. And so we make this operative by really going through, if someone's overwhelmed, what are the sources of pressure and where do boundaries need to be put in place? And we can put boundaries in place around our calendar. Sometimes all we got to do is start saying no more often. We can put boundaries in place around our responsibilities and our energy. Sometimes we got to delegate, automate, or eliminate certain tasks, right? And that's okay. There are people who are better than you at the things you don't like doing and that actually like doing them. That's okay. Sometimes we need to put boundaries around our headspace, meaning, oh my gosh, are there some consuming thoughts that we just spend way too much time spinning around in our head? Guess what? Nobody else is a gatekeeper of your mind and heart. You are your gatekeeper, and I am my gatekeeper, which means I don't always choose the thought. I don't always choose the input. The other day I got a very, very a message that left a very bad taste in my mouth. And I didn't want to receive that, and I didn't want to keep thinking about it. So finally I had to put just a little mental boundary, right? And say, you know what, I've got other people that need my energy and need my attention, and other tasks that need the best of me. So I'm not going to give away the best of me to this little thought to spinning in my head. That's an example of a mental boundary. We get to put boundaries around our relationships as well. This isn't being cold or cruel or being a jerk to anybody, but we do, to a large degree, get to choose who we spend time with. And someone out there might be saying, well, no, I didn't choose, Jan in the cubicle next to me or whatever. Okay, well, technically we get to choose where we work, how we work, and we get to choose, even to a large degree, the influence that we have in the relationships around us. So, hey, maybe you're one conversation with Jan away from it actually being a really great dynamic, right? Or at least not a life-giving, or life-draining, energy-draining dynamic, right? And so guess what? We get to put boundaries around that and be proactive. We don't control other people, but we absolutely have influence and can be proactive around our calendar, around our energy, around our relationships. And there are more, but I'll stop there.
That's great. And This is huge, and people need to hear it. How does emotional integration make it easier to live unscripted? That's our theme, by the way. TEDx Lake Worth Beach. Can't wait for Wes to share this on the stage. But how does emotional integration make it easier to live unscripted?
Yeah, that's a great question. When we're aware of what's going on, and there's research that I will talk about in my talk, that points to the importance of being aware, and the buzzword is emotional intelligence. When we're aware of what's going on inside of us, then there are things that are going to come up that surprise us, and we're going to go, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea how much I needed that," or actually, this is really exciting to me. I don't even know why this is so exciting to me, but I kind of want to do this because there's something inside of me that's getting excited about this opportunity. That's unscripted, right? Or conversely, gosh, I got really upset about that. And that's another way that paying attention leads to surprise and unscripted. The other part is, even if we know we have to have a hard conversation or problem solve something,
Yeah.
that my big thesis is that's activating energy to do something constructive.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing. We obviously can learn skills to do things well, but ultimately we're only responsible for us. I can have the hard conversation with somebody else, but I really don't know exactly how it's going to go. I know how I hope it goes. I know how to keep my conscience clean, my intentions coming into it. I know my wording, what I'm saying, what I'm not saying, coming into this hard conversation, right? But ultimately, I don't know where it's going to go. I hope it makes things better. Most of the time, hard conversations are very clarifying, right? But ultimately, in terms of the theme of unscripted, we don't know exactly where it's going to go. Versus if I never have the hard conversation, I know exactly how stuck, frustrated, and drained I'm going to be.
Yeah. Man, is it ever? I'm talking about spontaneity. As you know, in my talk, and there's kind of like these. There's this idea that spontaneity. Some people feel like it's dangerous or reckless, right? And I think that's like change, the unknown. Like, man, and on the other side of that, it's also exciting and lights you up. And I'm just curious in the emotional world, is spontaneity dangerous if you don't understand your emotional world or you're not connected with it? Is that when it becomes dangerous?
Yeah, I think what you're getting at is impulsivity. And I think that there is a difference between spontaneity and impulsivity.
One of my chapters in the book is spontaneity is not impulsiveness. They're different. I make that distinction in the book. Yeah.
There you go. So well, I would love for you to answer the question.
Well, I'm curious because, I look, you're trained in this stuff. I create these beliefs and these feelings, and then I look for scientific data to back it up, of course, but you're trained in this stuff. So I'm just curious. Tell us about that impulsivity.
Yeah.
That's the danger of spontaneity or something.
Anecdotally, impulsivity has gotten many people into a lot of trouble, including me. And so while we don't need to have everything calculated, what we want to have is tools, right? So when things come up, we're not just leaking, right? Or spewing, rather we're harnessing. And so spontaneity is different because it's less of there's an emotional element, right? But it's not like I got angry and so then I said this. It's more of like oh, hey, this opportunity came up. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Which is exciting. There's an emotional element, but it does feel a little bit more, maybe sounds counterintuitive, but it feels a little bit more rational, like a little bit more cognitive than necessarily just like, I felt all this stuff and blah.
Yeah. I like people that are intact and solid emotionally are typically, in my experience, is able to make decisions quicker, which I guess goes right in alignment with spontaneity over impulsiveness, where, because it's all a decision. It's all a decision. And maybe you can make a poor decision if you're not emotionally intact. Who do you become when you stop fighting what you feel?
You open up the possibility, and I'll say that because it's a journey, right? And there are skills. This is the beauty. I found myself saying this a lot. Almost everything in life is learned skill, which is good news because there was a time when you didn't know how to walk or talk or feed yourself or ride a bike. And now those are second nature, right? So think about like where you feel stuck in relationships. Hey, you're just one learned skill away from a dramatically different dynamic in that relationship. And it can be learned just like all the other things that you've learned in life. So Who do you become? You become someone who is, I think you become someone who's ultimately more present and more available and more, I would say, in shortest term, fully alive. Why? Because you are aware of values, boundaries, needs met or unmet, and you are taking responsibility to create that reality, both internally, but also in your external world, in your relationships, in the decisions that you make, where you work, how you work, where you live, how you live, where you play, how you play, where you worship, how you worship. When we are more aware, then we are more intentional. And I believe that we are given the capacity to create the life we were created for. The problem is, most of us, we give too much power away, and we lose sight of the fact of how much is within our control. There's a lot that's not in our control. Let's be honest. A ton that's not in our control. We just always focus on that versus we forget how much is within our control, from attitude to decisions to even dynamics in a relationship. So that's what's at stake. That's who you become.
It's heavy, man. Can we do I like to do like a lightning round sometimes, just throw some questions at you.
Let's do it. Yeah.
And,
Chris.
Quick answers. So, anxiety, enemy or ally?
Ally.
Most misunderstood emotion?
All of them. I would say anger.
Emotion people suppress the most?
Anger.
One emotion high performers pretend they don't have?
Shame.
What emotion do leaders need more of?
I would say anger.
Anger is usually protecting what?
Oh, this is not really like a lightning round question. It could be so many different things. Protecting self.
Yeah, my sister always says, she's like, anger is not a real emotion. It's just kind of a manifestation of something else, another feeling.
It is a secondary. Yes, there's always a primary
emotion.
So,
yeah.
I mean, yeah, I can be sad, grieving. I can be hungry. I can feel shame. I can feel lonely. Those are all very different. I can feel disappointed. All very different, and they all come out in anger. Yeah.
Is emotional suppression ever healthy?
I mean, maybe the 1%. When you're in combat, don't matter what you feel, just stay alive.
Is stay positive sometimes emotional avoidance when you say stay positive?
Yeah, sometimes.
What's worse, overreacting or numbing out?
Numbing out.
Can faith ever be misused to bypass emotion?
Yes. I talk about that a lot, actually. Faith is an incredibly important component. And just like anything, it can be twisted into something that it was never meant for, to bypass emotion.
So, one sentence advice to someone overwhelmed right now.
You have the resources available, people around you, breath in your body, and the power to make decisions.
And if someone only remembers one thing from your TED Talk, what should it be?
Our hardest emotions are not actually our enemies, but superpowers.
Oh, love it. Here, I got one more question for you. Is that cool?
Mm-hmm.
If emotions had a microphone, what would yours say to you right now?
Right now, it's to take a nap.
You heard it here, guys. Wes, thank you so much for popping on with us. Is there anything I'm not asking you that you want to share with anybody who might see one of these clips that gets dripped out there?
You've asked a lot of great questions. Yeah. It breaks my heart to see people of sincere faith disconnect spiritual maturity and emotional maturity. And we see this in a lot of sometimes national and sometimes interpersonal ways. And it breaks my heart because the two really do go hand in hand.
That's awesome. Wes, thank you so much for joining us. Can't wait to experience this live on the stage in Lake Worth Beach, the Playhouse, March 8th. Man, it's right around the corner. I got this big giant sign in my living room. Got to get sponsors. If anybody wants to participate, because right now this whole thing is being sponsored by Chris and ticket sales. We're going to put a link to ticket sales here for you if you guys want to grab some tickets. There are a couple left. I think the afternoon is almost totally sold out. And I think nobody bought just a morning session. So everybody either bought for afternoon only or a full day. And we have those available. I'm going to put them here in the comments. This is on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and then the smaller clips. I'll have the links in there too. That'll be good. So thanks for joining it, man. Thanks for joining us. Can't wait for everybody to experience this live on the stage. So if that's all, we'll see you out there. Peace out, everybody.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, my pleasure. Oh.